The highway was empty. Too empty. The only lights were my headlights cutting through the fog, the dim glow of the dashboard, and the faint blinking of my CB radio. The clock read 2:03 a.m. I'd been driving all night, hauling my usual load, music low, mind half asleep, counting mile markers. Night shifts are like that, quiet, monotonous, until something breaks the silence. Then the static started. At first, just a faint buzz over the CB radio. I tapped the MIC breaker. Breaker, anyone out there? Nothing. Then a voice came. Weak, panicked, almost trembling. Help. I'm stuck, same road. Please. I froze. The coordinates it gave weren't GPS, but I knew them. I recognized the mile markers. The voice was calling from exactly where I was. Impossible. I checked the mirrors. Empty road. Not a single car behind me. Hello. Who's that? I said, my voice cracking. The radio crackled again. Don't stop here. I slammed the MIC down, heart hammering. The voice repeated my own words, almost mimicking me. I shook it off. Glitch in the CB frequencies. Some prank. Then I noticed the timestamp. On the radio screen, 10 years ago. I blinked, checked the clock. 2:03 a.m. tonight. But the voice log, it was a recording. A timestamp from a decade earlier. I pressed scan. More static. Repeats of my route. My own truck number. My own license plate. Cold sweat ran down my back. The voice came back, louder now. You shouldn't have come this way. I slammed the brakes, skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. Nothing. Only the fog. I radioed dispatch. No reply. Dead lines. Then I saw it. In the rearview mirror. A truck. Old. Rusted. Headlights dim. Matching mine exactly, but somehow wrong. It followed. Perfectly. Mirrored me. Turned when I turned. Braked when I braked. I pressed the horn. Nothing. The static on the CB grew louder. Words forming in the noise. Don't leave. Stay. My vision blurred. Mile markers shifted. The road stretched longer than it should have. Curves that never existed before appeared in front of me. Signs flickered with impossible dates. I tried to call again. The radio whispered. My own voice. Warped. Help. I'm stuck. Same road. I realized then, it wasn't a recording. It was me. Or it would be me. The truck behind me edged closer. Too close. Headlights blinding. Mirrors showing impossible reflections. My hands on the wheel, but the truck cabin behind me. Empty. I swerved. CB screamed. Static. Then silence. Then I saw it. A sign emerging from the fog. Exit 47. Abandoned. I took it. Tires screeched. The fog swallowed the road behind me. The truck vanished. I stopped in a lot, shaking. Cold sweat. Heart hammering. Checked the CB. Dead. Just static. I breathed. I tried to calm myself. But then the static returned. A second truck appeared in the mirrors. Same model. Same rust. Mirrors reflecting me perfectly. Except this one smiled. I tried to drive off. The road behind me was gone. Mile markers twisted. Trees bent sideways. Signs warped. Time itself felt wrong. I slammed the brakes. CB radio squealed. Whispering voices now, dozens of them, overlapping. Help, join, stay, run. I passed under an overpass. My GPS flickered. Years rolled back. Mile markers dated 10 years ago. Then 20. Then 50. I blinked. Truck behind me had multiplied. Hundreds of them, stretching into the fog, mirrors showing my own terrified face over and over again. I realized I was driving into a loop. Every turn, every swerve, every attempt to escape was anticipated, mirrored, echoed. I panicked, slammed the horn. Flashing lights, mirrors twisting the landscape. Fog forming shapes, people standing, watching. Faces of drivers who vanished on this road before me. I closed my eyes, tried to breathe. The CB whispered, "Welcome, back." I opened my eyes. Empty road. Fog lifting slightly. My truck alone. I reached the exit ramp, Safe. Maybe. Until I checked the CB1 last time. The timestamp, 10 years ago. The distress call, my own voice. And in the rearview mirror, another truck. Rusted. Headlights dim. Mirrors reflecting me. Smiling. I slammed on the brakes. It vanished. But I knew it would be back. Somewhere on this highway. Waiting. Watching. And the radio whispered one last time. Next time. You won't escape.
All right, let's get this shift started. Night number 3 at the old Blackwood building. Honestly, this place gives me the creeps. But hey, a job's a job. Just me. A wall of monitors. And 10 hours of blissful silence. Or so I thought. The first couple of nights were a total cakewalk. Just the usual rats skittering in the walls. The building groaning like an old man. Nothing a good podcast couldn't drown out. But tonight feels different. There's a static in the air, a hum that gets under your skin. It started subtly. A flicker on camera 7 pointed at the West Wing corridor. I rewound the tape. Nothing. Probably just a power surge. Then, a shadow darted across camera 3. The one in the main lobby. It was too fast, too defined to be a trick of the light. I zoomed in, my heart starting to thrum against my ribs. It was gone. I told myself I was tired, that my eyes were playing tricks on me. 10 hours staring at grainy black and white footage will do that to you. But then the real show began. On camera 9, covering the abandoned 4th floor ward, a wheeled one that had been sitting in the corner for years, started to move. It rolled slowly at first, then picked up speed, coasting down the empty hallway before crashing into the far wall. I jumped back from the console, my coffee splashing onto the floor. My breath hitched. This wasn't a draft. This wasn't a prank. There's no one else in this building. I checked the logs, the access panels. All secure. I was completely alone. My hand hovered over the phone, my fingers trembling. Who do I even call? Hello, police. A ghost is joyriding in a wheelchair. They'd think I was crazy. Maybe? Primera. What? Ese? I took a deep breath, trying to rationalize it, and inclining the floor. A tremor. But I knew. Deep down, I knew what I was seeing was real. The air in the security office grew cold, a damp chill that had nothing to do with the ancient air conditioning unit. I decided to do a system-wide diagnostic, just to be sure the equipment wasn't malfunctioning. As the system rebooted, monitor by monitor, the building fell silent again. For a moment I felt a wave of relief. It was a glitch, a massive, terrifying glitch. But as the screens flickered back to life, one by one, the image on camera 5 made my blood run cold. It was focused on the basement storage area, a maze of dusty shelves and forgotten junk. Standing right in the center of the frame was a figure, a tall, slender silhouette, completely still. It wasn't a person. It was two. Doble. Wrong. The limbs were too long, the posture too rigid. It just stood there, facing away from the camera. I couldn't make out any features, just a dark, solid shape. I watched, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. It didn't move a muscle. I tried to zoom in, but the image just dissolved into a mess of pixels. I switched to the adjacent camera, camera 6, hoping for a different angle. The basement was empty. I switched back to 5. The figure was still there. It was only visible on that one camera. My mind was racing. Was someone messing with the feed? Hacking into the system. I ran another security check, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard. All channels secure, no external breaches. The figure was in the basement. It had to be. But why couldn't the other cameras see it? Then, as if it heard my thoughts, the figure on camera 5 slowly, impossibly, began to turn its head. It didn't turn its body, just its head, a slow, creaking rotation that defied anatomy. I didn't want to see its face, but I couldn't look away. As it turned, the static on the monitor intensified, a high-pitched whine filling the office, the face that came into view. It wasn't a face. It was a blur, a vortex of swirling static where features should have been a void. My heart hammered in my chest, a drumbeat of pure terror. I scrambled for my keys, for my phone. That was it. I was done. This job wasn't worth my sanity or my life. I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled. I slammed my shoulder against it, but it was like it was welded shut. Panic set in cold and sharp. I was trapped. I spun back to the monitors, my only window to the outside world, my only connection to reality. And what I saw next shattered that reality completely. On every single screen, every camera from the roof to the basement, the same image appeared. The figure with a static face. It was no longer in the basement. It was in the lobby, in the corridors, in the ward, on the roof. It was everywhere. And it was no longer still. It was moving toward the camera on each screen, its long limbs gliding in a jerky, unnatural motion. Closer and closer. The high-pitched whine from the monitors grew louder, becoming a deafening roar that filled the small office. The lights flickered and died, plunging me into darkness, save for the ghostly glow of the 30 screens in front of me. On each one, the static face grew larger, filling the frame until there was nothing else. My back was pressed against the locked door. There was nowhere to run. The screens began to flicker violently. The figure was pressing against the lens of each camera simultaneously. The glass of the monitors started to crack, spiderwebbing from the center. I could feel a strange pressure building in the room, a force pulling me towards the screens. I tried to fight it, digging my heels into the floor, but it was impossibly strong. My vision started to blur, the edges turning into the same swirling static I saw on the screens. The roaring sound was inside my head now. I was being pulled apart, pixel by pixel, drawn into the light. My hands, my arms, they were dissolving into a cascade of digital noise. I screamed, but no sound came out. The last thing I saw before my world went completely blank was the security office. My empty chair, the spilled coffee on the floor, all viewed from a new, horrifying perspective. There's a new security guard at the old Blackwood building now. He sits in the same chair, drinks the same bad coffee, and complains about the graveyard shift. He says the job is boring, that nothing ever happens, but sometimes, lately at night, when he's not paying close attention, he might see something on the monitors. A flicker on camera 7. A brief, fleeting shape, and if he were to rewind the tape and look very, very closely at the grainy footage of the empty security office, you might just see a face trapped in the static, screaming without a sound. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more unsettling tales. Stay safe out there.
The night was quiet. Too quiet. I was finishing my first solo shift at McDonald's. The dining area was empty, tables stacked, chairs flipped upside down. The smell of fries lingered in the air like it was alive, clinging to my clothes, to my skin. I was about to clock out when I heard it. Laughter, high-pitched, echoing from the play place. Impossible. The kids had been picked up hours ago. I double-checked the time. 2:47 a.m. The lights in the play place flickered, a weak yellow glow bouncing off plastic tunnels and slides. I grabbed my flashlight, heart hammering, and walked closer. The laughter grew louder. Not a recording, not a prank. Alive, echoing, bouncing off the walls, twisting around the corners. "Hello?" I called. No answer. I forced myself to laugh nervously. Probably a speaker malfunction. Maybe a leftover recording from earlier. I stepped closer to the ball pit. The laughter stopped. I shined my flashlight across the balls. They were perfect, clean, not a speck of dirt, not like the messy piles from earlier in the day. Then I noticed the footprints, small, childlike, scattered across the balls, but not human. They were too long, too thin, too perfect. I froze. A ball rolled, slowly, by itself. Another followed. The whispers started, soft, high-pitched, like the wind through the tunnels. "Play. With us." My flashlight shook in my hands. I grabbed a mop handle from the supply closet for some sense of protection. I leaned over the ball pit. The balls shifted slightly, forming shapes. Something crawling underneath. I stepped back, then I saw it. A tiny hand, pale, thin, emerging from the balls, clinging to the edge of the tube. The laughter returned, distorted, mocking. I stumbled backward, knocking over a mop bucket. The echo bounced down the empty hallways. The CCTV monitor flickered. On the screen, the play place was full of children, hundreds, crawling, staring, sitting perfectly still, watching me. I spun around. The dining area was empty. When I looked back at the monitor, empty again. The whispers were closer. Join us. I ran to the kitchen, past the registers, toward the back exit. Footsteps echoed behind me, small, rapid, many of them, but the hallways were empty. I reached the exit door, locked, tried the side door, locked. Panic was rising, my heartbeat deafening in my ears. I grabbed my phone. No signal. The flashlight barely worked. The lights in the play place flickered violently, throwing shadows that stretched and moved like they had their own life. I returned to the monitors, desperate, CCTV glitching, static filling the screen, images skipping. And then, one of the screens froze on a single frame. It was me, sitting in my chair, smiling. Not smiling like I was smiling. Smiling like the shadows had taken over my face. I ran back to the ball pit, shined the flashlight down the tunnels. Something moved just at the edge. Something long, thin, crawling. A figure darted across the tubes, gone before I could see it. Then the balls bubbled again, slowly rising, forming shapes that looked like heads. Tiny, pale heads, laughing silently. I backed into the supply closet, shaking. The laughter seemed inside my head now, distorted. Every voice of every child I had ever seen that night, all warped. I tried to block my ears, tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, too many long shifts, too much coffee. I peeked through the closet door. The play place was empty, but the camera above showed something I couldn't explain. Small figures climbing the slides, crawling through the tunnels, emerging from walls, watching me, smiling. I ran again. The hallways stretched longer than they should have. Impossible angles, doors leading to nothing. The ceiling bending like the building itself was breathing. I stumbled, hitting the floor. My flashlight rolled under the counter. I reached for it and saw movement in the reflection of the stainless steel freezer. A small figure, barely visible, but crawling toward me. I screamed. My voice echoed down the empty halls. And then, silence. I opened my eyes. I wasn't in the office anymore. I was on the monitor. The chair sat empty. The office, empty. But from the shadows of the play place, hundreds of tiny figures were crawling toward me. Waiting, watching. The whispers were louder now. My name, my fears, my thoughts. And the last thing I saw before the monitors flickered to black was my own reflection in the ball pit, smiling.
The night shift had barely begun. The hospital was silent to silent. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the constant beep of machines were the only sounds. The antiseptic smell clung to the air like a warning, sharp and suffocating. I was stationed at the nurses' station on the 3rd floor, scanning the monitors for vitals. A routine night, mostly empty hallways, paperwork, and endless monotony. Then I noticed it, Monitor 14, a room I had never seen before. Its vitals were normal, heartbeat steady, oxygen level fine, blood pressure stable. I frowned. I knew every patient on the floor. Room 14 didn't exist. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe a glitch. Maybe a new patient in a hidden wing. I leaned closer. The vitals began to drop, heart rate falling. Oxygen dipping, slowly, imperceptibly. I looked away for a second to check my clipboard. When I looked back, heart rate, near zero, a single, sharp beep sounded. I froze. The phone lines were dead, the intercom silent. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the corridor where room 14 should have been. Nothing, just a blank wall. I returned to the nurse's station. The monitor was now displaying multiple unknown rooms, patients I'd never met. Their heart rates all falling in unison, numbers flashing like warnings. My stomach twisted. The overhead lights flickered. Shadows stretched across the walls, unnaturally long. I thought I heard whispers soft, incoherent, echoing from the empty hallway. I focused on the monitors. One room's vitals flatlined. I whipped around, nothing, but in the reflection on the monitor glass, I saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hall, watching, pale, motionless. I spun. Empty hallway. When I looked back at the monitor, the heart rate was rising, and the figure was closer. Another room, another floor, impossible. Panic surged. I walked the corridors, checking doors. Empty, silent. The hospital seemed to stretch. Hallways bending at impossible angles, stairs looping back to themselves. The monitors flickered violently, static, then images of me walking, checking rooms displayed on the screens. But my reflection was wrong. Hollow eyes, pale skin. A faint smile I didn't have. I backed into a supply closet. Tried to breathe, tried to rationalize, but then I heard footsteps, soft, small, approaching from the hallway outside. I peeked, nothing. The monitor flashed. Room 14 again, heart rate falling. A tiny figure standing by the bed, motionless. I ran, hallways stretched infinitely. Every doorway I passed led to more monitors. Each one showing rooms I'd never seen, numbers dropping, flatlining, rising again. And that figure watching, always watching. I tried the emergency exit, locked, side doors, locked, panic rising, heart pounding in my chest. The overhead lights went out, total darkness. The monitors flickered back. Room 14 now had a patient, me. Sitting in the chair, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling. I ran down the corridor, shadows crawling along the walls. Whispers overlapping, stay, you're next. I stumbled, knocking over a mop bucket. The clang echoed endlessly, bouncing off hallways that seemed to stretch further than possible. I reached the stairwell, steps spiraling endlessly upward. When I looked down, the hallway below twisted impossibly. Shadows at impossible angles, figures moving in the corner of my vision. I tried to run faster, but my legs felt heavy, dragging, as if the hospital itself resisted me. I ducked into a patient room, empty, safe. Maybe the monitor inside blinked alive, vital signs my own. Heart rate dropping, oxygen dipping, blood pressure falling. I spun around, shadows pressed against the walls. The whispers grew louder, my name, my fears. My own thoughts spoken aloud. I realized then the patients weren't real. The monitors weren't real. They were feeding off my attention, my fear. Every time I looked away, something grew stronger. I closed my eyes, tried to breathe, tried to calm myself. When I opened them, the hallway had changed. Doors I had passed before led to new floors, stairs twisted into impossible shapes. The lights flickered to reveal dozens of figures in the shadows. Watching, waiting, I ran again. The hospital's layout now impossible, hallways folded into each other. Rooms that shouldn't exist appeared, monitors flashing images of me in the chairs, smiling. I stumbled into the stairwell again. The stairs seemed to go on forever. I fell, head pounding, vision blurred. When I looked up, dozens of reflections of me climbing, all with hollow eyes, all smiling. I couldn't scream. No sound came out. I saw one last monitor in the stairwell. Room 14, heart rate, 0, oxygen, 0, blood pressure, flat. And then the whisper, you're next. I woke up at the nurse's station. The monitors were normal. The hallway quiet, shift ending soon. Everything looked ordinary, but when I glanced at the screens, room 14 blinked briefly into existence. Heart rate, 80, oxygen, 98, and in the far hallway, a figure, pale, smiling, watching me. Then it vanished. I don't know if it was a dream, but I know I'll see it again.